That's right.
Good afternoon. We'd like to call to order our Monday, June 8th, Fayetteville City Council special meeting. At this time, we'll have the invocation. Get Pastor Wright, if you wouldn't, Bishop Wright. Mind give us a prayer, and then if we could stand, let's go into. I know we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance at 7, but we're in chambers. The flag is here. Let's do the pledge as we would normally do it.
Always appropriate. I thought we were doing the invitation first.
Let us pray. Father, in the precious name of your Son, Jesus the Christ, we come before you simply first to say thank you. And God, we appreciate you for being the God of unity, the God of love, the God of wisdom and all understanding. We're living in dark times, Lord, challenging times all across this world. But God, we that are here in the God-blessed city of Fayetteville, North Carolina, ask for your guidance. We ask for your wisdom tonight, for there is so much that we're thankful for. We're thankful to be alive. We thank you for positions of authority and to make change. But God, help us to do it together as a community. Bless our mayor, our city council, our staff, and citizens of this great city. We ask you to help us. We need you now. We don't understand all what's going on, but God, you're in control. And we want to thank you for the outcome, for we believe that victory belongs to the people. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, at this time, item 3.0 is the approval of the agenda. Mr. Manager, did they have the closed session request in here, or we need to add that?
You need to add it, sir.
So, Council, Mr. Van Gans has some things he'd like to talk to us about, economic development related. Can we consider adding that to the agenda?
Make a motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, so Councilman Hare, I think you had made that motion. Will you consider adding of that? All right. So that is a motion by Councilmember Hare to approve the agenda with the addition of closed session.
Closed session.
Reference to economic development. There's a second by Councilman Wright.
Mayor, you added
Discussion
that
on
at the end or the beginning?
beginning. Yeah, item 4 point. Yeah, whatever. Okay. Split the difference, right? All right. So, council, any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor, hands. All right. Motion carries. So, need a motion to go into closed session. So, motion by Councilman Harris, a second by Councilman Dawkins to go into closed session, reference economic development. Any discussion on the motion? All right, council. All those in favor? All right. If you could. in light of where we are in our country, in light of certainly where we are in our, even our local area in the city of Fayetteville, I think it's appropriate at this time that as a local body, we had our special meeting on Sunday, immediately following Saturday night, but we had a specific purpose that night was to put the corrective actions in place to bring law and order and safety back in our community, which I think we were very successful with doing that. But now as the community starts to rebuild and repair, there are commitments that we've all made to put this very sensitive item front and center. And as we look to our organization, the reason I added this tonight as we talk about racial equalities, as we talk about best practices, about inclusiveness, and to make sure that we ensure transparency and accountability on our law enforcement side of that. Wanted to bring that front and center from a policy perspective tonight to talk about what our plans are going forward. Just kind of to have input. It really didn't have an agenda item with an attachment. This was kind of wanting to hear from the policy board and us to start a discussion about steps going forward. We won't solve the problem tonight, so let's maybe articulate our points, but not try to debate it if it becomes a debate, but just to maybe let's lay out a roadmap that we can explain to the citizens about what the next steps are concerning racial issues and equality throughout our organization. And remember, at the end of all of that, our role as the council, the governing body, is policy and budget. So those type things that we recommend, we can affect in those two areas. But I'll leave the floor open. Maybe we'll allocate about. This will be the same model that we'll use for the next item, because it's not really a CAM or anything attached, which is police oversight. So if what we have to say about the organization's racial equality practices is related to police, that item is 4.2, and then we'll leave 4.3 for an update from Chief Hawkins and Chief Hill and Mr. Bullitt on public safety updates. So let's allocate maybe, right now we've got about 40 minutes left in the hour. Let's allocate maybe 10 to 15 minutes per item, or we'll play it, according to what we need to do. So I'll leave the floor open for any comments. Councilwoman? And you have to raise your hand because we don't have the benefit of the light. So, all right, Councilwoman Kinston?
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things that I would like to say is, in speaking with some of the citizens in my district, there's a phrase that I've been very familiar with in my work that says a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And those mouths are being opened. They're asking for some change. They're asking for a conversation. They're wanting to know, what is the council going to do? Racial injustice right now is at a high. And we have millennials, as I said, that they're not used to having these conversations, and they're holding those feelings in. Facebook has been the outlet, and you're seeing a lot of things on Facebook, a lot of communication, but there's no outlet to get it out. So they're asking to have those conversations, to sit down and meet with them. There may be several groups, and several groups may have a different agenda, but at the end of the day, everyone wants to see some change moving in a positive direction.
Okay, I totally agree. Councilman here.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know what any manner of enforcement that we can do. And we've had discussions about the Market House for years. And what my question is, do we have any support, or can we request that every time we see the news, the key point of our city is always viewed with the Market House, and we sometimes we may not like to talk about it, but we all understand, if those of us that have any type of study, any type of history of Fayetteville, is it anything that we could make a request to the local stations that is so much more to us? I mean, now
we ought to be able to just maybe pull up, and if that's the case, we could show the stadium and we could show some of this end, but we've always sort of been labeled. And especially in today's time, in the atmosphere that we're in, is that anything that we could do to kind of shoot that out to them, what we would like to be the opening of Fayetteville?
So,
As far as newscasting goes?
So, Mr. Arata, is there a way that you can request our, just like we would request to the newspaper to use our professional picture, is there a way to request that when they're representing us, unless there's a specific news issue related to that, not to open it up when they show, Raleigh Durham Fayetteville, as he's saying, they show the Market House. When News 14 comes on in the background, it has that image. Is there any way to have a formal request that maybe it's the stadium or the Special Operations Museum or something, particularly in these sensitive times? Have you ever heard of anything like that?
I've not, sir, but it doesn't mean we can't try it. And I think, especially given what's going on right now, if it were a time where they would take something like that as a recommendation, especially if we had a letter signed by yourself and council that says, here are the reasons why we're asking that, it's certainly worth a shot. The biggest challenge you run into is that is a very visible, iconic feature of the downtown. And so until there is something that replaces that, like you said, sir, the stadium is a good example.
The stadium is, just like our Airborne Museum is. It's a whole lot that represents the city.
Sure.
Me growing up as a boy, it was the clubs all up and down Hay Street, surrounding Hay, and of course, Hillsborough Street. And that's what we were sort of known for. But marketing, we changed it. Same thing can be done. To me, that's an easy fix. I know it's not up to us because we don't own it.
And it ties in nicely, which is something that we'll talk about later and differently, but which is our branding. And so when we look at the brand relaunch, which we're going to do in the next 60 days, when we come to you with a solution on that, this could be a good tie-in to do that at the same time.
We'll see.
Yes, sir.
I'll be looking.
All right, thank you, sir. Councilmember Waddell, I think the manager indicated you had a question or comment. Is she
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I would like to recommend that we as a body engage our Human Relations Commission and that we also engage our Millennial Advisory Commission and that we begin to host for at least the next 3 months, monthly meetings in our community where we allow very specific conversations to take place regarding race, equality, equity, and how those things are being portrayed or played out within our community. And then I would recommend that we move to having these meetings at least quarterly and that we have them with an objective in mind, that it not always be, we need to start off just listening. Maybe the first 3 meetings or the first meeting in particular be a listening session where we are hearing the concerns of our community and our citizens, and not just the Black citizens where race and equity are concerned, but all of our citizens. And that we are then coming back together and we are having genuine conversations about what some solutions are to address the topics that are being brought to us. I think that a lot of people right now have not been heard. And even as I'm listening to some of the comments that are coming in from the community, there's a lot of rebuttal going on, but there's not a lot of listening. And I think that we need to utilize the agencies that we have set in place. Our Human Relations Commission has been excellent when it comes to facilitating these types of conversations. And I think that we should engage them right now. And the reason I say our millennials is because we see there's a very youthful demographic that's coming out to be heard, and they need to be heard. And if we can engage our millennials through that commission to be able to help us facilitate those conversations, I think we can get some really good information. And once we begin to get that information and catalog those questions, then we can come back to the table. And I would recommend that as we engage those 2 organizations, that we each of us be present at those meetings, because we not only need to demonstrate that we are supporting our community, but that we are hearing them too, and that it doesn't have to be secondhand information that we're on the scene to be able to hear. So those are my preliminary recommendations as far as how we may be able to move forward.
Thank you. I think those are good points. Great points. Councilman Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a very sensitive topic, and to me, as a Black man in this country, and in this region of our country, it's very it's very intense times, and as a leader in the community, in the sense of speaking, you know, as an elected official, we are the voice of all the people. But the topic is racism, or prejudice, and that's dealing with race. So when you talk about the Market House and what it represented in the past, here in 2020, I would like, you know, for us to be known as a progressive council looking into the future of what the image of Fayetteville would look like in the future. So when you talk about the Market House, given the tense environment in which we're in right now, is very critical, because I've been looking at emails and texts of people on the other side that has other views based upon what they feel about the Market House. It's just like the Civil War. It's just like the Confederate and the other side. There are always different views of historical views and views of heritage. So I'm sometimes offended at the Market House because of they sold my ancestors there, but that was the nature of what was going on back then. And so when I talked to someone about it, you know, the Market House, they did sell slaves, but it's a historical structure as well. So we're not talking about tearing it down. I was like, well, who started talking about tearing the Market House down? So creatively, and I agree with Councilwoman Waddell. We have to research, we have to get viewpoints, we have to get outlooks on both sides, and give it to the committees, and then bring it back to us. But I think that there is a solution going forward, and as a council, I think we need to kind of unfold every layer before we move to a critical decision of something of this magnitude at this point, because there are strong feelings on both sides. But I believe that we're at a turning point in the country, and how we address this issue sometimes could be leaders of examples of how others could address issues across the country. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councilman Wright. Mayor Pro Tem, she thinks I can read these little letters from over.
6 feet.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I wanted to say that I agree with Councilmember Wright. Very eloquent words, great words that you gave out. A lot of knowledge and a lot of knowledge there.
Thank you.
So thank you. I also wanted to say that I wanted to back off of Councilwoman Waddell too. I agree with what she's saying. The only thing that I ask is that I have had the privilege, which is funny how a circle goes around, of a lot of the alumni of the Youth Council have been calling me. They have been a lot of my calls, the ones that are in college and that have moved on after high school and loved their city. And it is interesting to see that what they are thinking and what they want to be heard. So I would ask that the Youth Council and maybe the alumni could be part of that conversation. I don't know if the Youth Council could because of the age, but I do know that I think there's a lot of alumni out there that are really wanting, that love their hometown, and they are off at school and they're doing internships. So I would ask for that too. Thank you.
Okay. So, Youth Council. All right. Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Dawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Councilman Wright. And thank you, Council Lady Jensen. I also want to thank Council Lady Waddell, what she said, Council Lady Kinston. I think it's our role as council.
What about me?
Well, I hadn't heard you speak yet, Mr. Mayor.
Right.
And Councilman Hare, fella classmate, and something I won't ever forget. A good man, good family, loves this city. Our role is to listen, I believe, and hear what all the community wants to say. I mean, there's, Councilman Wright has seen some rough stuff on Facebook, and I've seen some rough stuff on Facebook too. And so we have some kind of some folks that have very, very strong feelings, hurtful feelings on one side, and very strong feelings on the other side. And you know, my guidance, I like what Council Lady Waddell said. We start with the Human Relations Commission. I like the idea about getting the millennials involved. Council Lady Ingram, I think, is the liaison to them. There's a lot of them that have a lot to say. We need to listen. I like the idea of starting there. My guidance, Mr. Mayor, for you to consider is possibly a city council task force where we involve our citizens, or possibly a city council committee. We have some level-headed folks on this council that would make great members, because we do need to talk about these things that are very painful, and the market house is one of them. And I think that we need to put plaques up to those families that were sold as slaves as an idea. Maybe we enclose the bottom part of the market house with glass and make it a museum that reflects what your ancestors went through, what African American slaves. I want that highlighted. I want a young black kid coming to Fayetteville, or a Hispanic kid, or a Caucasian kid. I want them to understand what all went on there. I mean, that's, I think, what we need to look at. I've even thinking that we maybe close that 100 block of Green Street and create an African American museum there. You've got the market house, and then we need to tell the rest of the story. We need to tell the truth. But that's kind of, I think this is not going to be something we're going to solve very quickly, meaning we need to listen, and then 6 months from now or sooner, we need to come up with some strategies. We need to allocate budget money toward it. We've got to figure out how we live together as black, white, brown, Hispanic, yellow, Asian, I mean, you name it. This is the most diverse city I've ever been in the world, and I've traveled all over the world. So I want to see something good come out of this. And I know the majority of this council, maybe all of us, want to see something good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, Councilwoman Ingram, did you have anything you'd like to add?
I wasn't gonna say anything because sometimes in my millennial mind, I most of the time feel that our words are not really heard unless we are tearing stuff up. So to be completely just honest, I would love to be protesting right now. I would love to be out there with my generation who want to be heard. I took notes on what every single last one of you said. I want to first start with saying that one of the things I think we all have to come to terms with is just like homelessness, that won't ever end. Racism will always be an issue. However, as policymakers, we have to put safeguards. If Councilmember Kingston was a white female and because she didn't like who I was because of the color of my skin, I cannot control what she does to me. But the policy in place can control that outcome of how she is charged. We as people, we can't necessarily control, and that's just the sad reality of it. We can't control how somebody else feels about someone, which is why we have to start at a young age with these children, when they don't see color, and when they grow up, they love everybody for who they are, or because, oh, Susie has a pink dress on and I like pink, not because of the color of their skin. So as policymakers, we have to make sure, yes, we are hearing our citizens, listening to them. This weekend, I had a pleasure of joining some yogis, as I call them, and we went to Dirtbag Ales, who sponsored the space, and we heard each other. We cried, we got our anger out, we yelled, we did whatever we had to do to get what we were feeling out of our system. And it was free, and it's something that is going to continue to happen. I love what Councilmember Waddell has stated, which was one of my recommendations, and I had spoken with the chair and vice chair of the Millennial Commission about bringing them in, and they are ready. My next point, Market House. I was talking to another millennial who's been leading these protests, and they said, well, how do you feel about the Market House? Now, I have close ties to my grandparents. One of my great-grandparent is from Burgaw, North Carolina, and that's a deep country. And so during the summers, me and my sister would have to go to the deep country, and we had to pick our produce for supper for the week. And if we weren't acting right, we had to go to cotton. But we made our pillows, but it wasn't a good experience. But as a 20-some-year-old woman, to say I had that experience, it says something. So when I think about the Market House, I'm not in favor of burning it down, relocating it, because while my ancestors were sold there, they built it. But as a Black elected official, I'm able to pull a little power from that to say my reality could have been just the same. And as a people, whether you're white, Asian, Black, brown, whatever, as a people, we have to choose how we are going to allow our history to really impact us. I'm not saying don't feel what has happened to history, but through this process, a lot of people have judged this council for our inaction or for the decisions that we've made. But in these moments, I chose to listen to our ancestors, and I chose to listen to history, and to understand that history does have a way of repeating itself. My final piece is, I talked to a lot of protesters, and I was out there in the heat of everything, taking a lot of notes, and recommendations did come to having a museum, making it an African American museum instead of having it burnt down. And I want to also highlight Durham, North Carolina, when many years ago, I think during the 60s, they held charrettes. And that's what pretty much I'm hearing Councilmember Waddell speak to. And you can find that in Best of Enemies. It's just a great movie. But I think we as a body, we will have to stand in this together and be united. And each and every one of us are going to have to be a voice as one and individual. We have constituents on both sides that are looking for us. And we only we can answer to how we move in this moment. I can't answer for anybody else. I can answer for myself, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Great. Before I go to I'll go to Councilman Davis, and I'll clean it up because we need to move to the police oversight part. Councilman Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, in this moment, we have both, in my opinion, a responsibility and an opportunity to clarify to the world and ourselves who we are as a nation. Like there are times when things go on in life where you take your eyes off of who you really are, and we kowtow to the extremes instead of leading from the middle. Because most often the extreme voices are the loudest, they're the most boisterous, they're the most off-putting, they're the most vibrant, they garner the most attention. But we must lead this nation from the middle, this city from the middle. When I say the middle, I mean balance, I mean justice, I mean peace, the words that unite people and don't divide people.
Yes.
And I believe when 80% of America says the same thing, then the other 20%, 10 on each extreme, will shut up and go home. But silence cannot be allowed. You don't have to scream, but you have to speak truth. Look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm not that kind of person. You know, if you're out there doing something wrong, if you're robbing banks, decide to be different. Don't rob banks. If you see people differently, fight that. Whatever ailment of the human heart, the human condition is plaguing you, and things plague all of us. We all have issues. All of us have issues.
Yes, sir.
Deal with that internal thing so that we can continue the work of forming a more perfect union. And that's the moment I believe we're at, where we're challenged right now to decide if, according to the preamble, that we're going to fight to continue to push to form a more perfect union. The world is waiting and watching. The world still responds to America. And I believe America can respond to Fayetteville. We are the most diverse place I've ever seen in my life. Like, we are the great American experience, in my opinion. And I wouldn't rather live any place else. But we've got to clarify who we are by action. And that's what I ask us all to do.
Well said, sir. So council, just before we move on, to add my perspective, I think that we had a pivotal time that the decisions made by the 10 of us will impact 200 plus thousand. See what that number is after the census, but 200,000 people will be impacted by the decisions that 10 people make concerning this issue. And so I think that our guidance should be that we do what's in the best interest of the city, right? Even though we have our personal points of view, we have our constituents, we have our bases, but whatever it is that we think is in the best interest of the city. And I think our number one asset, those two said it twice, that I've said it in my last two speeches at inauguration. Our diversity is our greatest asset. Because of that, we can figure this out, no doubt about it. So what I heard us say today was that we engaged the Human Relations Commission. Dr. Wade's online, he's been listening, but we engaged them. We engaged some representation from our Millennial Council to make sure that they feel a part of this. I'll leave it up to you guys. I don't know the sensitivity on the Youth Council piece. I like it, but the parents may have an issue and it may open up a whole different, but I like it, so we can talk about that from a policy piece, okay? Okay, the alumni, those who've graduated. I like the fact that we have the community discussions. The only thing I'd ask that we consider with that is that we move them around the city so that we don't have to have people come to us, that we can go to them to make sure that we get the highest maximum participation. The market house is a difficult situation. We all have our personal perspective. I like the concept that was proposed by Councilman Dawkins or some, that maybe the council put together, we put together some committee. Let's have further discussion on that. May include citizens, may not, but something that will be well received. Or maybe we allow the Human Relations Commission and some of these community discussions to get engaged to help us make that decision as to who's on it and what it looks like. Because the 10 of us will have to make a decision that will impact 200 plus thousand, and they'll have to live with it. If it's, and like I said, we need to make sure that we make sure that it's only truth is perpetuated online, on social media, that no one on this council has talked about burning down anything. No one on this council has talked about bulldozing it. Our citizens say what they want, and I think that we have expressed tonight, each one of you, that we are looking to do what's in the best interest of the city, is where we started that. And also I'd like to add for your consideration, a number of cities have engaged an outside racial equity consultant that comes in and helps us through the challenge. There are people who are in this space that helps us figure this out. This is tough work, but I think we can do it. So those are the things that I think I've captured everything that everyone has added to that. Citizens, we're on it. We're asking for some patience. We're asking for your input, and we're asking for your prayers for wisdom as we work through this. So with that, council, we'll move on to police oversight practices. Chief, you on a tight schedule? Well, come on, because you can dovetail into the next. So I like to always try to respect her time, but So, before I get your professional point of view,
Okay.
no doubt that the relationship between the police and the community is under pressure right now in many places. But I think that a lot of the seeds that we've sown here have left us in better shape than a lot of places.
Yes.
Okay. But as we look at our law enforcement arena, tell us a little bit about the difference between, and I don't want to get you in any situation, so you can not answer whatever
Okay.
you need to avoid answering. But in your opinion, you've worked in Atlanta, you've worked in another jurisdiction. How does it compare to the community relationship that we have here and those things that we could improve on? And then it may be a round of questions or comments briefly from council members.
So first of all, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. It's been very inspiring, to hear everyone talk about the racial equality discussion and meetings that you talked about ahead of time. What we've done here, what we've been doing here, and, I came here knowing that I had a purpose to being here. But the difference of the love that I felt from the community is different than any place else I've been. And it's been sincere, and maybe because I'm in there a whole lot, but it's not just me, it's across the board. The investment that we as a department have done building relationship in the community has allowed us to, one, be able to listen, empathize, understand, and allow the community to vent the national frustration, allow them to express and share, and we still listen. We talk about the racial equality training. Last fall, we were invited, the police department with the community, and we attended, myself and some commanders, to the one-day training. It was about 15 of us, and it was eye-opening. It was put on by the Racial Equity Institute, to the point where I put it in a grant to bring in the springtime, but because of COVID, it had to be rescheduled for August for the next level. For my department, it was a 40 maximum class, my department and members of the community, to, one, be aware of what the data shows, just plain and simple. But also, since this weekend, I know I need more in my department to build an understanding, because they present CDC information, not just law enforcement, every aspect of it, because education and empowerment is part of the understanding and the training for law enforcement. How we stand, I think, is one. Been a couple hard weeks, but it's amazing because we have new people to the table with new voices, new opportunities to hear what are the concerns, but also the opportunity to educate what we do. To summarize what we do for other departments, we're evolved. We're accredited. We do a lot of things. If you remember last fall, I personally was in front of Congress testifying about police accountability and what other organizations need to do to take the steps to make sure they're accountable. I couldn't be there if our department wasn't an example of what we do to make those changes. I couldn't be testifying based off of things that we've done and being the leaders. Our department is the leaders of how law enforcement should establish guidelines. The issues are our city is butted up against other cities, other jurisdictions, then it is no across-the-board standard of how policies are governed. There's nothing, it's by choice. So things like that, but the first thing for you and for the community, one, stepping in to be able to have time to ask questions. Tell me, what does this mean? I'm always about education and empowering it. What does that mean, and what does it look like when you talk about force, when you talk about the duty to intervene? That's federal law. It's case law established. Making it just a policy, we get trained in that. We know that across the board. But you all have that information of the decision making. When I invited members of council and they attended the virtual training to know just a small sample of what it takes in a split second to make a decision. You can't do that without having over and over practice. So to your question, our community is different. we still can't ignore the voices that we haven't heard in the past. And like I said, having this opportunity to hear new voices and learn, okay, let me hear your voice. Let me tell you what we do and how it should play out. Now, how do we work this out to say, should it be better? Why does it exist? And what else is it that you would think you want to understand to make us better, to show everyone else in the nation on how we're doing it?
Well, did have a couple points to that. I'm gonna go to Councilmember Ingham and Wright. One of the most common things I've heard from citizens is a review board process, which we've talked about that. Maybe briefly, if that is not what one of the other council members talk about, maybe you can just spend a second on that part of it to familiarize ourselves with that, which will need the General Assembly's assistance. But just, I don't want a real long, I just want to know what you think about it, as much as you can say from a law enforcement perspective.
From law enforcement.
To the second part, to what I was asking about, of course, nationally they're talking this defund police. Don't believe in that, but what I think I garnered out of that is, do you believe that a percentage of your budget should be used for proactive steps like youth involvement or some areas that would make your job down the line easier?
I'll answer that first. Yes. Okay. And when it's not existing in general funds, we write grants for things like that all the time. So a lot of the things that we do, we write the collaboration with the community for things like that in community policing. So we definitely do that. But you're right. Yes, that would help out. And in that dialogue, I believe it is to address the issues that, we train officers in crisis intervention, and we train officers to do first aid, small mental health care, which maybe they're trying to indicate more funds should be going towards that. So, but to that end, yes, we follow the rules of the land, sir. And in North Carolina, there's restrictions on transparency, restrictions on looking at personnel files or IA investigation. I come from another organization or another state that is not a hindrance, because all that information is exposed. So the laws over sunshine laws are different for North Carolina than Georgia. I'm accustomed to it being open. So even if you have an oversight, it's still limited to what they can see. So until everyone, my opinion, can see everything, you're still going to have the doubt of who may be on the commission or who may be looking at it.
And I think there was some federal legislation introduced that may deal with that. Okay. Councilwoman Ingram.
Thank you, Chief. You spoke to a point that I had as a former Georgia resident. I've noticed the difference between transparency. So the first piece I want to ask is, what can we do as a body to help get to that level of transparency? Do we need to send a resolution up? What do we need to do as a body? Secondly, do we need to offer more citizens police academies? I love ours. I've taken the sheriffs. Don't tell them I said this, but we have the best one.
We do two.
We have the best one.
We do two a year, but we are willing to even consolidate it for council, just so you all can be able to answer questions for your constituents that are drilled down questions and consolidate it and not stretch it out, like maybe having a one-day crash course to be able to answer, your highlighted things, because it's important for you all to understand that. So yes, if we could, but it takes a lot of resources to put the two on, and we cover the last one 40 to 50 people in each session. So.
And then I wanted to talk about PAL, but first that transparency piece. I guess what some recommendations could we do as a body to help get to that level of transparency? Because I would love for citizens to be able to see, just have that access. I enjoyed having that access, but I would love for citizens to be able to, and that helps with our trust relationships. Yeah. We work really hard to have a community and partnership, as you say, one agency, one community, one family, and I think that'll play a huge role in that. So whenever you have time to send that over to us, and then PAL,
Send what over to you?
like how we as a body can help with getting to that level of transparency as Georgia. That state level, but
at
city
state
level,
level.
right. And so what do we need to say to our state legislative?
Well, what we did before in that regard was we passed a resolution, unanimous resolution like we did the other night, if we all vote for it. We send that up as our legislative ask. We give it to our state lobbyists that we engage, and we start to call our state legislators to ask. They've got legislation in Charlotte and Durham. They can give Fayetteville something similar. But
Okay, and then to PAL, I think it was the mayor just talked about youth engagement. I know we have PAL. We just opened a new building, February or January?
December, but we have
December,
We have
okay.
extensive youth engagement.
And I know we do. And so, what efforts extra could we do? I think we do enough, and I think it's about accountability for the citizens as well. When I moved to Georgia to be alone by myself and work, the first thing I did was called my fire chief and my police chief, and I made myself on first name basis with them. And me as a young 20-something-year-old woman, if I can do that, then I know our citizens should have that mind to do that as well. That's all I have.
thank you. Oh, they're doing that prayer out
I'm
there.
on the agenda.
Okay. Okay. We got to
Yeah,
get you out of
I'm
here.
on the
All right.
program.
So,
I can come back, though.
Councilman Wright.
Okay, well, it's gonna take a little time, but I know you gotta go, but
I can come back.
okay. So I want to preference my questions with a statement. The police department across the country has a stigma, and this stigma comes from the history of
Yes, sir.
policing in this country, and we know that history.
Yes, sir.
And why police departments was formed in the first place after Reconstruction, slavery, that kind of thing. And it leads us to this point where people don't trust police. But we have come a long way with policing in our country, but evidently based upon the tension that we have, people still don't trust police 100%. And that's the reason why. But I want to commend you, Chief, as a black police officer in leading the charge in the turning of, if you will, at a turning point in our country. You're doing a great job. But I want to ask the question, when we talk about the blue code or, police protecting police, if you say something, then you become a rat. I did over 20 years in the military, and we got that code. If you're in the foxhole with me, it doesn't matter whether you black, white, yellow, whatever. I got your back. We have a brotherhood in the military to a large degree, and that's what makes us successful. So, and I feel like as police officers, they're on the front line every day. They put their lives on the line every day. And to some degree, they're not as appreciated as they should be. But then when you have a few bad cops do what they do, it reflects on the whole force. So how do we, I guess it would be you and your force, change the mindset of a community that don't trust, that don't believe in the police based upon the history? And then is there such thing as a blue code or that type of safe thing? And then I'm gonna ask my question, and you can answer it. More diversity on the force, just giving your perspective, and police officers protecting and serving in the community in which they relate to, of which they grew up in. Kind of deal with that for me, and the mindset. So I'm gonna just leave it right there. And what are some of your policy changes that you think were needed, not only in Fayetteville but across the country, when it comes to building that?
So I've mentioned the policy changes all across the country, being accredited, looking at best practice, but still never stopping, always looking from within, empowering everyone in the organization when they see something they think should be better, or when it's open to the public, when the public sees something and provide recommendations of why does it exist, how can we be better in that. It's open door. Does the blue code exist? Of course, it's not a secret. The blue code existed. It's been in history of how it existed. It's been individuals that have done our best to say, how do we change that? One person at a time, one relationship at a time, one accountability at a time, one eradication at a time. I remember my first day when I was announced, and they were like, I heard you're tough. Is that a bad thing to be strict as a chief, to hold people accountable? But yet, even when the media was asking the question, it was a bad thing to be titled tough and accountable. It is not. Now to make sure that ethics, that we are held to a higher, we sign an oath to be held to higher standards, higher requirements. We know what we signed up for. And we know internally we have to hold each other accountable. And we know across the board, you will be held accountable and called out. It no longer is the cool thing to have the code of the blue code, because you're going to be called to the table on it, and it's being exposed. So, it's a big ship. The ship can't be just snatched and moved. It has to have due process in personnel. And when you see it, identify it and lay everything out to eradicate it, and then so that it doesn't go someplace else. So the gypsy police cannot move to another organization because it's noted in the state they exist and people do backgrounds to hire. It takes time, but it does take us speaking out in law enforcement every time we see it. Just the reason why, it used to be the code not to speak out against another agency or another jurisdiction. It's enough. It's enough for the leadership to do that. I got a letter today, and it was anonymous. The audacity, because I spoke out against something happening in Minneapolis. I should have been quiet because it's not my city. Okay. Wrong is wrong, and that's the message that's going out. So, what was your other question, sir?
It would be some of the policy changes, and I know you have to go, so if you
We're open. They're open, the open data portal, but remember, we're accredited, meaning we get checked by the accreditation organization that says, no, you're out, this is not best practice because of this. But like I said, empowering everyone to look at them and say, let's talk about and see what we have so we can try to adjust or figure out. And we do it also when we see things, officers doing a rule and they say, well, that's what the policy says how to do it. Then we are reevaluated at that time as well. I'm sorry.
We're trying to get you to pray. But hold on, Councilmember Hare, and I'm trying to read lips. Councilmember.
Hawkins. Oh, yes.
Oh, okay, I'm coming. After Councilmember Hare.
you.
And remember, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Oh, Councilmember Water. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, okay, thanks, Chief. And the attorney may be able to help with this, so I'll leave the review board question last. When I saw on the news in different cities across the country of that apprehension move, I just call it
the arrest or what?
with the knee on the neck.
Oh yeah.
Whatever you call what you do, procedures and whatever. And then I heard in some of the officers and other chiefs in other locations were saying that how they have outlawed that.
It's not in our policy.
So, okay, so that was going to be my,
That's not
something
appropriate.
that,
Yeah.
and you just stated about, well, I won't do that. As far as the review board goes, and I think the attorney may have to help us with this, I know it's been an issue with us back and forth in Raleigh as far as getting that done, but is it anything that can be done on our level where citizens can have more of an involvement in reviewing, and just like when we did that ethics
Not until the
thing.
laws change. I'm sorry.
Okay. That's the end of that.
All right.
All right.
I thought I saw. Not to.
Councilmember Kinston and then Waddell.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, okay.
I would like to just mention, for the citizens that are not aware of it, that on last Thursday, I did submit a council member request. I think you had stepped out at that time for us to do a review of the duty to intervene. So that was one step that was already in the positive direction. And I do thank council for voting on that unanimously and getting that put out there. So for those citizens that are listening, we are making changes, and this is something that's already being reviewed and will come back to council. Thank you.
Thank you. And you also reiterate, because it's law, it exists. They reiterating it, they know, and they were reminded before that as well. So Definitely, thank you. And I think he said Waddell.
Yes, Councilmember Waddell, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Chief Hawkins, and to my fellow council members who raised the questions they raised. I want to really kind of highlight the fact that often when things start happening around us, even if they're not happening in our backyard, sometimes we think that it's a possibility, or we're unaware of whether or not it can happen in our backyard. And I think that one of the most powerful tools we as legislators have available to us right now is the tool of information. And I think if we are able to give information to our constituency base and get information out into the community about what the truth is about the requirements, the regulations, and the procedures of our police department, we can combat a lot of the misinformation. And I want to speak directly to some of the demands that I've heard coming out of one of the groups who has really been very, very consistent in showing up at City Hall and you know, making statements against what they believe we are or are not doing. We don't have any jurisdiction over the county jail. That falls under the county's auspice. And I want to remind the citizens within the city of Fayetteville that this is an election cycle. And so it is a great idea to go and take your concerns to the people who are responsible for addressing them. And if you are not getting the information or the attention that you feel you deserve, it is your responsibility to vote accordingly. And so don't delay the issue by bringing before a body that can't make any, we don't have any authority to change the conditions in the Cumberland County Jail. We can talk to people, we can petition, but we don't have the authority to make those changes. We are a city agency. Secondly, when it comes to the Citizen Review Board, the council prior to the one that I came in 2017 has submitted a unanimous resolution indicating, and I believe that Mayor spoke as well, indicating that they were in support of a Citizen Review Board. Nothing has transpired to say that any council subsequently has changed their position. It got held up in Raleigh. Again, I say, it is an election year. And so if your delegation in Raleigh is not responsive to your request, but you have to talk to them, you can't just come and stand in front of City Hall and make your request. You have to tell them to. And if they're not responsive, then it's our responsibility to vote differently.
Councilmember Waddell, you there?
Might have froze up.
She's gone. She's on. Councilmember Waddell, you there? Councilmember Waddell.
Can you hear me still?
Yeah, we got you now.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, we heard
Okay,
you.
so I was just saying, our responsibility, the final thought that I have is our responsibility begins at the polls. And if we want to see a change in some of this policy, because this board has been very consistent in being responsive to the needs of the community, particularly where those types of concerns are being raised. In as much as you see the resolution 10-0 that said we agree, we'll agree to this. But now we need for the citizens to go to the agencies that hold the final authority and push on those agencies and hold them accountable too. So we have to make sure that we are educating our citizen base to let them know who's responsible for what and to let them know what we're doing well, because, and even what we're not doing well, because if we give them information, that will combat misinformation. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
I think you did a great job summing it up. Just left off the cash bails. The city council has nothing to do with setting cash bails. Okay, so, but this has been very helpful. I think the citizens learned a lot. I think what we got out of the gist of that is you probably need to make your request known to the boards that can actually do something about it, because it's not within our jurisdiction. Chief, before you go, I know you got to pray. Update on public safety, 30 seconds, just so I don't have to call you back.
Update one. I believe that we're getting through. We're still staying vigilant. We have we have this tonight, and we have proposal of things coming up in the next week. So we're still saying we still need the community to pay attention. Keep their voices up, keep us updated. we're finishing up, of course. Now we gathering the data for crimes that we can solve. You see, we're pushing out arrests that have been made, and we're just going to keep on working. The unfortunately, regular crime still is happening, so we're still on top of that. But we're moving slowly back into normal operations. For the past week and a half, everybody's been all hands on deck. So we're slowly easing back, just to see. So.
Thank you. Great job. I know you've been getting very little sleep. Go pray.
I got
We
5
might
hours
pop out
yesterday,
there
sir.
and
Yes, thank
See
you.
about it. All right. See you. Chief. Go ahead. Chief Hill, can you come up while Councilmember Ingram is addressing the manager?
City Manager, can you tell me how long we can expect to have the caution tape around the Market House?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And the chief can speak to this as well. As you know, the Market House did sustain damage from the fire 2 Saturdays ago. It is still being assessed by a structural engineer for the repair plan. And while the march and protest are ongoing, we don't feel it's safe to have people under the Market House. And so we have the caution tape there, but we are looking for a more decorative way to be able to block that off, but still not necessarily make it look like it is an active construction zone. And I think the caution tape is part of what you're speaking to, that it makes it look like it is of danger. You don't need to have people under it at the moment, but we're exploring ways that we can make it look more attractive, but still limit access under the Market House.
Thank you. And do you know when that plan will be finalized?
No,
Not
ma'am.
to rush or anything. Okay, thank you.
Chief, want to give us a quick snippet of state of affairs from your end?
Yes, sir. Very pleased to be able to say from a fire and EMS perspective, reflecting back last week, we have very little to report. We experienced no injuries, and we were called to treat no injuries that were protest-related.
Say that part again.
We treated no protest-related injuries. We experienced no damage to any of our equipment or facilities, and we had very minimal fire damage throughout the entire event. Really, one ATM machine is all we lost in the city. Speaking to some of my peer fire chiefs from across the country, we're thankful. We're very blessed.
Amen.
That's it.
So, thank you, sir. Yes, sir. All right, council, we wrapped it up. Good job. We'll have us a break and come back at 7. Let's go ahead and get some prayer.